Hey everyone, I'm here with the rest of the Board of Directors in Alumni House on campus. This time of year, everyone gets a little bit reflective about how the year has gone. So we thought we'd add on to our President's page this week with a video interview of us asking each other some questions. So come on in.
What are you most proud of this year?
Ooh.
Well, I think for me, I'm most proud of the hard work that a lot of our services did this year. I think we've taken some great steps to improve our service delivery, so better communicating what all of our services do and how students can access them. And we've seen like such growth in numbers.
I was pretty proud of that bus pass.
That's also pretty
Yeah,
cool,
that's what I was going to say. David and I were lucky to work on something that has a 3-year impact for students, right? And so next year with the bus pass coming in, 12-month service, late night service, it's kind of not a legacy project, but it's something that we'll get to leave students with that will last for 3 years at the bare minimum, right?
I think that's it. What have you learned in your time as a student leader at McMaster?
It's a deep question.
I think for me personally, taking criticism is one of the hardest things that individuals can learn how to do effectively. It's never easy to take criticism. You're going to take criticism no matter how good you are at something, and learning how to take criticism, reflect on that criticism, and become better, especially in a public forum, is a really important skill to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, including from people who don't even know you.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that happens when you put yourself out there. People who don't even know you will sing your praises, and that's an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
And then people who don't even know you will say the worst things about you.
Yeah.
And that's really tough, and you just kind of have to learn to deal with it, right?
And this is just going back to the criticism thing. Sometimes it's hard to take criticism when people don't understand the nuance that exists with university issues. Why don't we have this? Why isn't the MSU getting results for me? Well, it's because there are every issue is tied together with another one. So it's very difficult sometimes to traverse that and make decisions that are in the best interest of students.
What is your greatest accomplishment as a board member?
I think we all have a lot of different accomplishments.
I will honestly go back to the bus pass. I honestly, we set goals that we weren't sure we were going to be able to achieve with the bus pass. We set goals that people told us that we were not going to be able to
ambitious,
achieve.
Yeah.
And we were able to execute on them. And I think that we did that by just being really proactive and really telling a story about what better transit means to students and how it will impact students. And so for me personally, that is probably my largest accomplishment.
Food trucks at homecoming. That's another one I'm pretty proud of. But it's funny, you sort of focus on these individual achievements that you had, but I actually think that as I've started to reflect on the last year, really what I'm most proud of is not so much one of those individual achievements, but more the tone that I think we as a group set.
Yeah.
A tone where I think we worked really well with the university. We were able to challenge them on things, but still work together. Same with, the other student leaders on campus, with the SRA, with faculty societies, with staff in the MSU. I'm really proud of the tone and the atmosphere that we set.
One thing that I'm particularly proud of is, of myself, I would say, how kind of quickly I jumped into the government relations aspect of this job, considering I had not a huge amount of experience with government relations. So things like, building in a government submission right from the MSU, I thought was a really cool thing and that I hope to see continued for next year. And just the amount of work that I put into, with the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, USA, things like writing policies, attending roundtables, writing pieces for the media. I thought that, going in wasn't the most important part of my job, but it's super important that students have a voice in government. because that is the source of a lot of issues that kind of trickle down to universities. So I'm just happy that I was able to be a part of that change.
I guess for me, there's like two things I'm most proud of. One is along like what you were saying, David, about tone. I think in my job, it's hard to sort of prioritize because there seems to be a lot of different competing priorities. But I think what I'm most proud of this year is that I really tried to like prioritize being the manager of all these part-time managers of our services. Because sometimes I feel like that can get lost when you're trying to deal with like welcome week stuff and like governance issues and other related things. So being able to prioritize, you know, working closely with these students, I think was one of my best accomplishments. And the second one is training. I know it's like cheesy to say, but I love training and like training people to do their jobs well. Because it's important. You want to make sure that they're set up for success, and hopefully that's a legacy I left. Better training.
Well, that's where I think, you know, people ask you, what are you most proud of? You think, well, you know, in 5 years, I think probably what people will look back on and remember, if they remember anything, right, is like bus pass, you know, food trucks, like bigger homecoming, like big events like that. Mm-hmm. But I think what we'll probably look back on and remember most is like policy with the government, right? Like learning how to budget and create a budget, like improving training, and those things have this tangible impact, but they're just not as exciting.
I think training.
That's what you can grab onto.
Training is super exciting. I'm so happy that you put an emphasis on training this year because, like, it I think it shows also the
important.
university why it's so important, right? And it's interesting to see how much emphasis we put into training, and how much emphasis the university puts into training for certain things. And I think we do a lot better, pretty much across the board with our training.
Well, I guess on a related note too, I think that shows how like a lot of our job is some of these like big wins, like a bus pass for 12 months or, you know, cutting like a MAPS fee. But then there's like these day-to-day pieces that you like won't necessarily get written up in the SIL, or like you won't be featured in the spec about it, but like they're equally as important because it helps the organization run.
Definitely.
And you might not see that if you're just a regular student, like an average student or a member of the assembly or even like a member of an organization sometimes.
My turn. All right. What was the funniest moment of the year? Does anyone else have an answer for that one?
I've got a couple. I think personally, when I had to sing at student rec night,
Oh, that was good.
That was good.
Actually, like the singing, you know, like some people just aren't natural born singers. It's fine. It's a muscle you can work on. Like, you know, it can improve. It's not. But it was the clapping that got me. Just like couldn't hit that beat.
Yeah, no, I'm artistically challenged.
A+ for effort, though. I mean, you like.
Oh yeah, I threw my hips into it.
Oh yeah, you were. The effort was all there.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
There were some funny moments at SRA. We talked about that at the last SRA moment.
True.
Is there anything during Welcome Week or anything like that? I don't think any of us ever fell getting onto a stage or anything.
What about when the engineers stole your golf cart?
Oh.
You two were riding around, and they like hijacked the golf cart.
Jeff decided to leave the key in the car.
Yeah. So engineers.
Funnier in retrospect.
Funnier in retrospect. They returned it. It was fine. That was funny.
It was a funny moment just to see Jeff running after the golf cart with the MSU flags flapping in the wind. It was hilarious.
It was all over social media too.
Yeah.
Do it up, Spenny.
Where do you see the MSU in 5 years or 10 years? That's a good question. I think that, well, it's difficult to say.
It's so dependent.
Yeah.
It's so dependent.
So
it's so dependent on the leadership. It's so dependent on what the student culture is on campus, right? I could say, I suppose, a couple things. One, I mean, we do have, you know, some extra money perhaps that we could be using for pursuing off-campus projects, capital projects, things like that. That's one interesting kind of long-term direction we could be going in.
I hope we keep building credibility.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a really solid, like, say, 5 years for the MSU in terms of building credibility in the university, in the community, with the province, with our own students, right?
Yeah.
And I really hope that trend continues. One of the tough things about like a question like this is, as with any student organization, with really quick like annual turnover, with even like the whole membership turns over in 4 years, in 5 years things could just change completely.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so hard to say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the things, like, I know we all like to do more like strategic planning for the organization, right? But it's tough because if the next group comes in and doesn't believe in your vision, they can just blow up the whole thing. And it's like, that's one of the beauties of the organization, right? But that's what makes it tough to say, 10 years down the road, this is what we'll look like. Did you achieve everything you wanted to this year? Well, that's like, so recently I just did my report to the SRA where I like broke down my platform. And I think something I took a lot of pride in this year was having my platform like glued to the wall beside my desk to make sure that like I stayed on track and I remembered those things. And for the most part, I think it was pretty successful. I mean, we mentioned the bus pass, bigger homecoming. We managed to eliminate the MAPS fee that students had to pay. And that was a big project for me because I felt that was redundant and unfair. And we managed to get rid of that fee. So the like based on my platform, I think we managed to do most of it. There were a couple of long-term things that will still require follow-up. Like Spencer, you and I both have worked a lot on better training for TAs, more teaching stream faculty members, so like faculty members who do more teaching and maybe less research. So there are those projects that are like more long-term. But yeah, I feel pretty happy about what we've accomplished.
I think it's the role of the board to be placing issues on the radar of university administration. Things build off each other, right? Like a year and a half ago, nobody in the university was talking about TA training at all.
Yeah.
Right? And now, it's become slowly becoming more and more of a priority of university administration. So I really hope next year's VP Education or President or both prioritizes that and makes sure that we are seeing progress.
I think that out of all the platform points that I had when I was elected Vice President of Finance, I accomplished pretty much all of them. One was like 50% because coming into the role, I realized that there were certain limitations of what I wanted to do. But I think that I didn't accomplish it in the way that I had said I was going to, but still made progress. And then the role evolved into a lot more than I also thought it would be. I think that I took on new challenges in Vice President of Finance role. I took on new projects. And I think that one of the things I'll look back on is I think I really personally feel like I evolved the role of Vice President of Finance this year. And I hope that continues. I really enjoyed working as a team with everyone, like the three of you guys, to advocate for certain things with the university, while the VP Finance was viewed in the past as a very internal role. I think we've kind of expanded it, and so I didn't put that in my platform, but that was something that really early on kind of evolved.
The one thing that I wish I could have focused on a little bit more this year was municipal advocacy, because I did make a point of talking about that when I was running, but quickly learned that it's something that we gradually have to move to. It's not just, let's just carve out more time for doing this, especially when you have a million other competing priorities.
Yeah. What was the most awkward moment of the year?
BDS.
Yeah. The boycott, divestment, and sanction discussion at the SRA about whether I should be allowed to have an opinion on discussing issues on campus was kind of awkward
moment.
Because, and so for context, a motion had come up at our General Assembly around boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel, and I had shared my opinion publicly that I thought the MSU shouldn't be engaging in making decisions about complex international conflicts. So that was my opinion. And then a motion was brought forward at our assembly saying that the board of directors should not be allowed to have opinions in public on motions at General Assembly before
Connected to their title.
Yeah.
Connected to their title and stuff. So that was kind of an awkward discussion.
Yeah.
It was awkward because it's hard to remove your position from your person, right? Yeah. Outside of the hours of 9 to 5, you are still Jeff Doucette, VP Finance, and everybody knows it.
Yeah. says it in the Twitter handle too.
What
Jeff,
was probably CASA was pretty awkward for you, eh?
Yeah.
I didn't get to go, but
Yeah. Are you specifically referring to CASA AGM? Yeah.
yeah, the recent one, yeah.
Here. Yeah, CASA AGM was kind of awkward, only because, the MSU and a number of other Ontario schools were dissatisfied with the value that CASA was providing to students. So, during that weekend, we had made it a priority to inform the membership, inform all the other CASA members about our concerns, and have some really tough conversations about why we were dissatisfied. Voting structure and the amount of fees paid to the organization were a big one. It was a tough conversation to have, for sure.
Yeah.
So what are the greatest challenges facing McMaster students in 2014? I think one specific challenge is the fallout of what's happened with the Red Suits on campus and Welcome Week programming going forward. I think that what happened there was tragic, and it's resulted in the university evaluating very critically evaluating faculty societies and how they're doing that sort of programming. I believe really strongly in the value of faculty societies and the programming they provide, but I think the challenge is how do we ensure that all of our faculty societies are behaving and organizing events in a professional way that still allows students to have fun, still allows student societies to be student societies, but also doing it in a way that isn't creating risk or alienating students or making certain students feel uncomfortable. So that, I think, is a challenge.
Well, and you talked about Welcome Week, but it goes to programming and support all throughout the year, right? And yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. It's not just you want to create an environment where students can really succeed, and that's what student leadership should be about, right? It's not when the university thinks about risk management with these sort of things, you hope that what they think is we want to create an environment where students will be safe, where you won't be alienating anyone. But risk management doesn't have to be risk aversion, right? It's okay to have students out there who will take risks, sometimes make mistakes. The university should make sure that that's done safely, but we want to make sure students have the opportunity to thrive, and making mistakes now and then can be huge growth, can result in huge growth for people, right? And that's what university is all about. So I think, sort of like you said, the fallout from what's happened this year, and making sure that we all remember how important it is for independence of student groups and student planning and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. One of the greatest challenges I see students facing in the next few years is their ability to get into the job market and really thrive in the job market. Youth unemployment is still about more than double the national average, and it's really important that universities provide opportunities for students to get real experience before going into the job market. One of the greatest challenges there is the amount of resources that universities have to do this. So I would say one of the biggest challenges that the organization and students face is making sure that universities are properly resourced, and we're addressing rising costs as well, making sure that university budgets are student focused so that students are getting the most out of a 4-year education and getting into the job market with good jobs.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one too, because and I think this is probably a problem that's been around for a long time, but for students in general, I think a big challenge is always figuring out why they're here.
Mm-hmm.
True. Right? And jobs are always a big part of it, and that's been a huge focus lately because of the problems as you were laying them out, right? And then on top of that, it's a lot of us aren't going to have just one career when we graduate, right? So it's, what are we here to learn about? What sort of skills are we developing? What is happening to us as a person that's going to help us confront that reality after we graduate, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not it's trying to find out that, or figure out that balance of, it's not just one job after we graduate, right? It's not career training, it's life training.
Skill training.
And how do we figure that out, right?
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing about that is that most of the data shows that it's not that there aren't jobs for university graduates. It's that university students are having a really rough transition into the labor market, right? And those first 6 months or the first 12 months out of your university degree, they're not finding jobs that are related to the degree, right? And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's my opinion. We don't need to create new job or new university programs, and it's not that these university programs are failing students. It's that there's this awkward transition. And so what can universities be doing, what can the sector be doing to ensure that students are walking out of convocation into a job rather than into their parents' basement for 6 months and then into a job.
Yeah. Well, 'cause I think it's also about communicating what the value of a degree is, and you sort of mentioned this, but you know, for a lot of students, if they're in a certain faculty, they think that they can only go to like certain channels to achieve success or like to be in a job. But I think it has to be more about like what skills you're learning, the general skills, like you were saying, David, because you could get a science degree and do so many different things with it that aren't necessarily the, you know,
don't have to go to med
traditional,
school.
the X, Y, Z, like that we think about. And how do you communicate that and show a student that that's possible?
And it's simple things as well too, right? Like a course outline, for example. Why don't course outlines have like a list of skills that you would get, like soft skills?
That's cool.
You know, we talk about learning outcomes. Let's talk about the learning outcomes that really matter in the real world as well.
Yeah. Like not just, you know, we'll understand in depth the biology of such and such molecule.
Yeah.
But like we'll, I don't know, practice
critical
public
thinking,
speaking,
critical thinking,
analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what was your biggest challenge this year? For me, 2 challenges. One, managing the 25 part-time managers of 25 very different services is very challenging in and of itself. And I think the second one that I found challenging was figuring out how the assembly works, because of the 4 of us, I had the least amount of experience, and there is a lot of like procedure and nuance to how to get things done at the assembly and to even just speak at the assembly. So figuring out how that works and being able to effectively manage 25 very different people and services was probably the most challenging for me this year.
Two jump to mind for me as well. One is summer fees. So that was a huge part of my platform, was trying to save students from having to pay the MAPS summer fee and the Ath and Rec summer fee. The MAPS fee we managed to eliminate, but that was a huge focus of like the first 6-8 months of us being in office. That was a huge project, was trying to get that completed. And the athletics and recreation fee is still ongoing, right? We're still figuring out, you know, if athletics and recreation loses that revenue, how are they going to make it up, right? Like we don't want to see a service cut. We just want to see like a fair way of charging students. So that one is ongoing. But those were huge challenges. The other one, sort of like you said, Anna, about like a more abstract challenge. I think a real challenge of this role and all of our roles probably, but I definitely especially felt it in this role, is the challenge of representation and like representing the students even on issues where like not all the students necessarily agree, right? So like red suits, other really controversial issues around like international conflict or about like things happening in Hamilton, right? Where students don't necessarily all agree, and you know, trying to figure out how you represent people in a united way still. Like that's been a huge challenge and a huge learning curve for me. Yeah.
Going off, I guess, both your points actually. The first one, I find the biggest challenge for me has been when discussing things with the university. The university can be an interesting environment to work in because every department sees itself as kind of its own entity, right? And so when I'm discussing something with this department over here, and I want them to see them have more money, less money, or whatever. Everyone views that as like a give or take type discussion, where we're just trying to have a larger conversation about the university as a whole, right? And so often when I'm discussing one thing, people are like, well, if you do that, that's going to result in this over here getting cut, or this something happening over here. And in reality, it shouldn't be that way, right? It's like we're trying to set a priority for the university, and often that's about student-centered issues, undergraduate student-centered issues. So it's not about us wanting to cut funding from this department. It's more about us wanting the university as a whole to prioritize something, right? And so those can be frustrating conversations to have.
I would say that one of the biggest challenges of my year was just dealing with this, very complex university system and some very major structural barriers to effectively advocating. And I think it always kind of boils down to the amount of resources that a university has to deal with, right? So the best that we can do as students is make a case for why our priorities are important, right? And we should also be doing the same thing at the provincial and the federal level as well to increase those resources. But it's very tough when we're going to the university and we're saying, we need better frontline support for mental health, or we need an investment into entrepreneurship. These are things that by and large the university already agrees with us on, but it's important that they're hearing that from students, but at the same time it's very challenging when we're all dealing in a very resource constrained environment. So I would say that was one of the biggest challenges that I noted with my job, was that it's hard. It's hard to manage a multi-million-dollar budget and make sure that its student interests are always kind of kept at heart.
What issues and initiatives should the MSU focus its attention on next year? I don't that's a good question. I think that it's obviously dependent on the individuals that are in all their roles, because everyone's going to come in with their own personal projects. But I think that we've started to set some things in motion that we hope that everyone picks up. So these were issues that we've started discussing with the university regarding ancillary fees, more investment in student services, central support services for the campus. As a group, I think that's probably a really important initiative that next year's board can pick up on.
I think that addressing campus space is probably going to be an important issue next year, considering we've seen massive enrollment growth with little to no growth in space. So, as the university starts to explore other options nearby, I think that it's important that students have a voice in what that looks like.